And so this day, this particular Sabbath, recorded before the foundation of the world was ever laid, you'd be here. You'd be allowed the privilege of listening to the individual that we're going to bring up in just a couple of minutes. And for us, it's a real singular honor. I've been in the ministry for 43 years, going on 44 now. And I know what it's like, at least a little bit, to walk similar pathways to what our guest speakers walked in the course of his life. More than 30 years ago, Abba spoke to me and he said, I'm going to make you a bridge, talking to me as an individual. Close to 40 years ago. And he said, I'm going to make you a bridge across the denominations. At that time, I was involved in the Assemblies of God Church, traveling different places. Then he said, I'm going to make you a bridge across the races. I did not know at that time that I would be marrying a black lady. And then he said, I'm going to make you a bridge to the nations. And here in our congregation this afternoon, we've got Russians, Chinese, some mixed ones. I don't know what some of you are. Hispanic. We've got a brother who's going to be sharing with you, Yehudim. And that's why I want to introduce to you a friend of ours that we've known for better than 20 years. And we've had the privilege of watching and listening to his story, watched his life, listened to what other people had to say about him. And I'm going to be honest with you, in all of these years, I've never heard a bad report about Bruce Brill. Never. And if you've traveled in any of the church circles, I don't care who you are. You could be the Pope, and somebody's going to say something bad about you eventually. Amen? And if you can go, and I'm quite sure there are probably those that have said bad things that I'm not aware of, but at least from my perspective, I've never heard anybody say anything bad of ill repute about Bruce Brill. And in thinking about that over the course of the years, I'm thinking, my goodness, it evidently has to do with the kind of lifestyle the man lives. And he's not one of those kind of individuals that just sits back on the couch with his arms folded and does nothing. Bruce is, I'm going to be careful how I say this. I don't want to offend him. Bruce is an instigator. Bruce will get right in the middle of individuals that are at odds with one another, and he'll get in there and stir the pot in order to make peace in the midst of it. And I thought, isn't that a powerful testimony? And here we are in the United States, and a lot of you probably like us, you're looking at end-time prophecy, you're wondering about what's going on around us. And if you're like us, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that we are connected with what happens in the land. What happens to Israel affects us. I don't care who you are, what you believe, you cannot escape that. And we listen to the media and we listen to the talking heads and we get all kinds of reports. And I'll be honest with you, I'm at the point where I don't listen to mainstream media anymore. And so I told Bruce, I said, Bruce, what's going on in the land? I want to know the truth. I want to know what's happening. I want a firsthand eyewitness report. What does Israel say about what's happening over here? Are we really friends? Are we enemies? What can we expect? What's happening amongst the quote-unquote enemies of Israel? Is what we're seeing in the media over here exactly the truth? How many of you like to know? Amen? And so without any further ado, I want to just ask Bruce Brill to come and just share from his heart the things that Abba's been speaking to him. Come on down, brother. And I'm telling you, you're about to be blessed. Give Bruce a hand.
Can you hear me? Yes, okay. Thank you, Pastor David. Thank you, Pastor John. And thank you, musicians. V'haya kenagen haminagen. It says in the Bible, in Hebrew, that music is an instrument for communicating with the spiritual realm. V'haya kenagen haminagen. I'd like to begin by telling you a little bit about my own background, and I hope I won't bore you. You know, they always say when you want your guests to leave, open up the picture album and begin showing pictures of your family. So I hope that this won't be akin to that. Pastor David said that there's so much misinformation out there, but there's also good information out there. And I don't feel that I'm qualified to be the spokesman for Israel. However, there are many others out there, and I have a list of some names that I'd just like to mention, and you can check them out. What I'll present to you is things that you probably won't find on the internet. So the names: Melanie Phillips, Douglas Murray, Danny Seaman, Mossab Hussein Yosef, Bibi Netanyahu, Professor Einat Wilf, Yishai Fleischer, Pastor Mike Huckleby, Ben Shapiro, Dennis Prager, Avi Abelo, Jonathan Karikas, Carolyn Glick, Dinesh D'Souza, Brigitte Gabriel. There's no shortage of people that are qualified to paint a clear picture of what's going on, better than me. So I will begin with a little background about myself. You see up on the screen, Deceit of an Ally. Deceit of an Ally is a name that my son gave this book. It's basically disclosures that recount what happened on October 6th. I didn't say October 7th. I said October 6th. Almost to the day 50 years prior to the infamous October 7th of a bit over 2 years ago. I began this talk with my book launch in Texas with this little news blurb, which said that on October 7th, a group of high-ranking left-bent generals had a telephone conference, and they saw that Israel would be invaded by Hamas in Gaza. And this was news 2.5 years ago, but today it's become front and center, as well as this man. Who is this man? General Aharon Haliva. General Haliva was the head of Israeli military intelligence on October 7th, 2 years ago. Take a good look at his face, because I'm going to present him again toward the end of the talk. And it's very important that you familiarize yourself with his face. It's a face that every Israeli is very familiar with, because he accepted responsibility for the horror that Israel was caught by surprise on October 7th. And he accepted responsibility. A little bit about me. Growing up in America, I'm 78 years old. I was in high school in the 1960s, graduated 65, went to college when the Vietnam War was in full swing. And it wasn't a popular war, as many of you know. And this song, The Draft Dodger Rag, gave every excuse why to get a deferment. Different medical deferments, psychological deferments. When you're in college, you had a student deferment. When I got out of college in '69, I had a occupational deferment because I began teaching. But then Uncle Sam was short of warm bodies and needed to have a draft lottery. Lucky me. From 2S, I got a 1A, and I was going into the service. Just as my dad went into the service back during World War II. This is a picture of my dad, and I want to show this. It has very little to do with what's happening in Israel over the past couple years, but it does have something to do with how Uncle Sam is a friend of the Jews. When he was serving, you can see, I can't get the cursor to work. Duh. Okay. His dog tag, right here, you can see the letter H. That meant Hebrew, that he's a Jew. But when he was sent to Europe to engage the Germans, and he was in Normandy on D-Day, and then continued through France, Belgium, Holland, and into Germany. When confronting the Germans, Uncle Sam was concerned for his Jewish servicemen and gave him an alternative dog tag. And you see down here, the P, all of a sudden he became a Protestant in case he was captured and fell into the hands of the Germans. Now, a lot of this stuff I'm going to just speed through, so hold on to your seats. These are all documents that led up to my enlisting in the Army. And when I enlisted in the Army, I took a battery of exams before enlistment to see what you're good at. And I aced the language aptitude test and was given language of my choice. What would you like? Chinese, Laotian, Cambodian, Vietnamese, Arabic? What was the furthest away from the jungles of Vietnam? Arabic. So I was sent to Arabic language school, actually it's foreign language school, in California, just down the coast in Monterey, for a year of Arabic language study. And then, that was at the Presidio of Monterey. It was a mixed service base, and at the time I began keeping kosher. I believe I told Pastor John. And the Zoomies, the Air Force guys, they were able to get separate rations by claiming that they were Buddhist or Hindu and that they couldn't eat in the mess hall. And meanwhile, I'm trying to keep kosher, and everything is cooked with lard. All the vegetables are cooked with lard. And none of the meat is kosher, of course. I was living on hard-boiled eggs and salad. So I applied for separate rations at the Army headquarters, and I was told to get lost. To make a long story short, the lieutenant colonel in our Arabic class said, "You go back to headquarters and apply officially," which I did, and I was sent to the post chaplain and asked, "On what basis are you requesting separate rations?" I said, "I'm a Jew." "Yes, but what chapter and verse requires you to have separate rations?" And I was so proud of myself because I'm not a Bible scholar, but I knew Leviticus 11. And he opened his Bible to the New Testament, and he says, "And Jesus said, it's more important what comes out of your mouth than what goes into your mouth," which is true, by the way. Rabbis say this as well. Oh, Jesus was a rabbi. And so he denied my appeal for separate rats. But the lieutenant colonel in my class had other ideas, and he arranged it. These were the temporary barracks that were built during World War II that we resided in at the Presidio of Monterrey. I'm going to speed through this because I want to get past Merwan, which is this fellow. He was a goat roper from Colorado, from the mountains of Colorado. The best linguist in our class was denied his security clearance because he told a little white lie before he enlisted. He walked into the Cuban embassy in Mexico City. Again, to make a long story short, he was asked if he ever had any contact with communist officials, and he said no. But they knew that he walked into the Cuban embassy in Mexico City and denied his security clearance. So he didn't come with us, even though he was the best in our class. After language school, we, except for Merwan, the goat roper, were sent to Goodfellow Air Force Base in Texas. And you can see I was a little bit of a naughty boy, where it says no cameras or photographing. That's me. But I wasn't terribly naughty. I didn't take the picture, so I didn't violate the rule. And was sent to NSA. NSA, back in the 1970s, no one knew about. Today, everyone's heard about NSA. This is post-Edward Snowden. NSA has become a known word. But back then, we used to joke and say NSA stood for no such agency because they kept a very low profile. And I worked in an area called G6, which dealt with the Middle East. We spied on the Middle East. Actually, spied on is the wrong terminology because we just collected information. Who is this hippie? And who's that nice-looking blonde girl next to him? This was at a demonstration, a pro-Israel demonstration in Washington, D.C., and that hippie was the head of the Hebrew department at NSA. And I can't mention his name, but he was a linguistic genius. And the blonde is my sister, and he became my roommate because I began learning Hebrew at the time, and he was looking for a roommate, and I was looking for the best Hebrew linguist on the block. So we became not only roommates, but close friends. This is in my book. This book, when it was a manuscript, I sent it to the Pentagon to get their approval because, again, I would like to consider myself a loyal American, and I would not want to violate my secrecy oath that I took upon entering intelligence work at the National Security Agency. So I sent my book to the Pentagon, and they said, you can publish it under two conditions. One, that you delete what we require you to redact. And number two, that you do not add one word of new content. And this, you can see, is an area that was redacted from the book. What is that? I can tell you basically what it is. I can't tell you the content. On the first day of the Yom Kippur War, because I was able to gist both Arabic and Hebrew, Egyptian Arabic, that is, I was given a special job to monitor live communication from the battlefront on the Egyptian front. And at that time, I picked up an Israeli soldier, and I can't give you details about the conversation that I was listening in on, but he had no idea that some American back in Washington, is listening in to his telephone conversation. But what I learned was that the Israelis on the front line were caught with their pants down. And this was on the first day of the Yom Kippur War. I should go back here again. The reason I'm showing this picture, that's me, this time, again, with two dog tags. You can see my original dog tag has my religion. This time it's spelled out. But when the war looked like it might involve the Soviet Union, and we were put on red alert, and I was assigned to the 82nd Airborne, and we were going to be airdropped into the Sinai, they gave me, Uncle Sam gave me an alternative dog tag, just like my dad so many years before. I became a Protestant all of a sudden. By the way, a little funny thing here. On my Jewish dog tag, it has the wrong Social Security number. On the Protestant one, it's correct. I don't know what that means. I think God has a sense of humor. An Orthodox Jew told me when I asked him, does God have a sense of humor? He said, yes, but the rabbis don't. During the war, it was clear that Israel lost a lot of armaments and needed resupply very badly. And I had the bright idea to take a sling. Back during college, I used to make slings and practice, and you could really get good at it, David, because you know a former David was very good at the sling. And I had a little bit of sense of humor. I made one, and I wrote a letter to Moshe Dayan, and I sent it to Moshe Dayan, who was the Minister of Defense of Israel at the time. And I said, I know you're in need of armaments, and this came in handy once before. I said, I wish you the same luck against Sadat. And so he wrote me back, and he saw that it was someone with fledgling Hebrew. And he says, Todal michtavcha miyom taratara, neheneti likro michtav katuv b'sfatenu ha'ivrit, which means, thank you for your letter of the 18th of October, 73. I enjoyed reading your letter written in our language of Hebrew. because he obviously noticed that it was fledgling Hebrew. By the way, his Hebrew in this letter is incorrect. He left out the et. This is something that Ben-Gurion wanted to revise Hebrew, and they thought that the et was superfluous. A week after I got Moshe Dayan's letter, I get a letter from his secretary. I'll read it to you if you can't read it. I have been asked to acknowledge with thanks the receipt of the eye patch that you were so kind to forward. A little bit of humor. And this is not humorous. This is what's called an eval, an evaluation report. This was the first time, well, maybe the second time, because the post chaplain, I experienced a little bit maybe of anti-Semitism there. This was a time that I really experienced Jew hatred. My immediate supervisor at NSA was a Jew hater, and he wrote me a terrible eval, which would have eliminated any possibility of me working as a civilian to continue working at NSA, and it could have been a blemish on my background. However, a senior in a church, I don't know if he was a pastor, but he was a master sergeant in the United States Air Force that worked in the next region where I was working, and he wrote an eval that replaced the Jew haters eval. So again, you see Philo-Semites and you see anti-Semites here and there, even in the American government. And you see his name is blacked out. I want to celebrate this man. To me, he was a hero. He was a savior. And I wanted to celebrate him, but the Pentagon Review Office disallows me to celebrate this churchman. Okay, my honorable discharge and so forth. Now we come to Israel. And 20 years after, every Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement, I was terribly troubled because I'm reliving what happened that Yom Kippur when the Israelis were caught by surprise. And we, however, in American intelligence, we knew Syria and Egypt were going to attack Israel. I personally knew a couple days in advance. Not only did I know a couple days in advance, I knew on what day the attack would begin. And higher-ups knew before me. Contemporaries of mine that I interviewed for my book knew days before I did. One knew a week and a half before I did. So I wrote a letter to the chief of security of NSA, and you can see, whoops, you can see maybe, I said, I served at NSA these dates, that one. Yeah, it's okay. I think I can read it. And I wrote some articles about it, and I wanted the permission of NSA to publish them, that I wanted to make sure that there was no classified information in the articles that I wrote. This was in the 1990s, 20 years after the Yom Kippur War. And what was the response? non-response. So I wrote them another letter the following year. Again, no response. Now I'm hot to trot. I'm really ignited about this because it bothered me. It's something that shouldn't have happened. And I wrote here and there, especially after I saw this article in the New York Times, 1975, September 12th, 1975, the results of the Pike Commission. The Pike Commission, Otis Pike was a congressman from Long Island, not far from where I grew up. And the results of this inquiry was that the spokesman for all of the American intelligence agencies testified before Congress that none of the agencies knew about the Syrian and Egyptian plan to attack Israel on Yom Kippur. What? We knew. We knew. Not only did I know days in advance, not only did I know on what day the attack would happen, but this was definitive. We knew this eval. This is a term that we used in the agency to mean that it was no doubt. No doubt. And so how can this person who testified, his name was Dr. Ray Klein, not Jewish, even though the name may sound like a Jewish name, not Jewish. He testified before Congress under oath, lied. He lied. So this really ignited me to begin researching more thoroughly. And one thing that I discovered was this CIA report that came out showing that America knew definitively because of this report. And you can see the first person who was given access to the report was Dr. Ray Klein. And you'll also see no distribution to state. In other words, it was kept secret. And this Ray Klein, he's the fourth from the left. Moshe Dayan wrote a protocol on the 7th of October, 1973. Here it is. He received an intelligence assessment from his American buddies stating that the Syrians and Egyptians have no intention of attacking on or before October 6th. What? I wanted to include this in my book, and this was after I received permission from the Pentagon to publish under those two conditions, that I don't add any new material. So I sent it back to them. So this book has the unique distinction of having been approved twice by the Pentagon. Okay, I'm going to skip this. This is a man that I happened to bump into. It was a finger of God experience that I met him, this Dani Ben Yaakov, because he becomes very central to the whole idea of how Israel was caught with her pants down. But I'm going to skip that. And I'm also going to skip this. How many of you have ever heard of or seen the movie Enemy of the State? Okay. This was a movie that was very popular, and it talked about an analyst of NSA, a retired analyst, who the NSA was gunning for, and he had to flee them. And what was his name? Gene Hackman played him, by the way. His name in the movie was Brill. And the screenplay was written right after I made those first disclosures in public in the 90s, in the mid-90s. So a lawyer friend of mine said, let's sue them. They obviously used your story and your name, but you have to prove it. Turns out that this man who's sitting in jail for the rape of a 14-year-old girl actually wrote the screenplay, and it was stolen from him. And he wanted Bruce Willis to play the lead role, not Gene Hackman. And how did he come up with the name Brill? He took BR from Bruce and ILL from Willis, and he combined them and got Brill. So it had nothing to do with me. Did you hear in the news, I believe it was yesterday, Congressman Doug LaMalfa passed away. He's the congressman of the 1st Congressional District of California, where I had residence a few years ago when I was writing the manuscript to the book. And I met with his assistant, this was in Auburn, to find out if the Jew room, what's the Jew room? I found out from the same roommate when he got drunk one day that there were rooms inside NSA that were off limits to me because I was a Jew and kept secret from Jews. And the name of this room is called the Jew room. And it's a misnomer because Jews are not allowed access or knowledge, and because it's not one singular room, it's multiple rooms. And so I wanted to know if the Jew room still exists. It was what I wrote to the chief of security back in the mid-1990s and didn't get an answer. So I went to my congressman to get an answer. And the answer was that the Jew room had been disbanded. So my question back to him, when was it disbanded? If it was disbanded, that's proof that it existed at the time in the 1970s. And in the mid-1990s, when John Loftus wrote his book, The Secret War Against the Jews, and referenced the Jew room in his book. So I didn't get an answer when the Jew room was disbanded. And I asked, can you give me proof that the Jew room no longer exists? There's Doug LaMalfa. So what does that have to do with today? What it has to do with today is that after October 7th, my doubts about the Jew room being disbanded was strengthened. How could it be that Israel was caught with her pants down yet again? So, this, by the way, is results of a polygraph test that I took in Israel. Is it true that there was a Jew room that I discovered at NSA? And I speak the truth. That's what this documents. Okay, I'm going to skip this and come back to General Aharon Haliva. So every Israeli recognizes him. So I ask my Israeli audiences, so tell me, do you recognize who I'm standing next to in this picture? No. Let's take a close-up. Still no. Still no. He's in disguise. It's Aharon Haliva. He met me. We made up to meet. And why was he in disguise? I think the answer is obvious to any Israeli. There's probably thousands of Israelis that would like to see him dead. And so he goes around looking like someone else. I met with him, and he said that the name NSA, National Security Agency, is a misnomer, that it's not a security agency. It's simply an intelligence collection agency. It's not a security agency. However, if there is a Jew room in NSA that works against Israel, it's unmonitorable, it works against an American ally, and it works against stated American policy. And you people are funding them. American taxpayer money funds the members of the Jew room that work against American policy and against an American ally, and they are unmonitorable. What could be more un-American than that? And I feel that's my purpose in life, is to disclose this cancer within the American intelligence community. Okay, now let's get on to my personal journey. On that first day of the Yom Kippur War, I swore that I would come to Israel. And that's what I did. Soon after I got out of the American Army and got my honorable discharge, I went to Israel. And again, to make a long story short, I met my wife there, and we began our family in America, working again for American intelligence. We worked in Maryland, and we lived with that same hippie that you saw before. There he is. There's a hippie dressed up with a suit and tie. He came to my wedding. He held one of the posts of our wedding canopy. We were so close, and we moved in with him. And we began working in intelligence, not in the agency, but in a subcontractor of the agency. And we translated documents from Hebrew into English. And these were documents, technical documents about different Soviet military equipment that were given to the Arabs to use, and they were taken by the Israelis, captured. And so the original technical manuscripts were written in Russian, and then they were translated into Arabic. And then the Israelis got it, and they translated from the Arabic into Hebrew. And then our job was to translate from the Hebrew into English. So you ever play that game where you stand around in a circle, and whatever began here, by the time it gets around the circle, it's totally unrelated. Same thing, a lot of these documents, it goes through Russian, Arabic, Hebrew, English. Much of it was hard to make any sense out of, but that was our job. And we lived with that hippie. And we called him Uncle Leo. That was his nickname. I can't give you his real name. So why am I telling you this? Because Israel supplies America with lots of intelligence. Every captured Soviet armament is known to America via Israel. So any of these people that say that, like that guy, what's his name? Tucker Carlson. He says that America supplies Israel with all kinds of aid. Israel also supplies America with aid. And that's an example. I'll give you another example. Shoes. There's an Israeli shoe company called Brill. Brill is a Hebrew name, by the way. Brill shoes. And they used to make the army boots for the IDF. But because America gave Israel aid, one of the requirements is that Israel has to buy American-produced army boots for the IDF. So the Brill Shoe Company lost a lot of business because of this deal. We moved to Israel as a family, and we made Tekoa our home. Tekoa is near Herodian. The weekend that we moved onto Tekoa, near Herodian, was the same weekend that one of the residents of Tekoa, David Rosenfeld, an immigrant from America, was knifed to death on Herodian. He was the manager of Herodian, and he was knifed to death. We moved on to Tekoa that same weekend, and they needed a replacement for David. New kid on the block. I worked on Herodian for over a year as the manager, along with an Arab, a local Arab, Abu Ismail. And I worked with Abu Ismail 9 hours every day for over a year, and we became very good friends. Again, there's good and there's bad. It was 3 of his neighbors who knifed David Rosenfeld to death. They were captured and put in prison. According to the Torah, a murderer should be murdered. Not murdered, but killed. He should see the death penalty. But Israel has not employed the death penalty except in the case of Adolf Eichmann. He's the only case where Israel used the death penalty. None of these Arab terrorists that are murderers, clear murderers, like the murderers of David Rosenfeld, who stabbed him over 100 times, were given the death sentence that they rightly deserved. These same murderers, in 3 years, were released. There was a prisoner exchange, and over 100 of these terrorist murderers were released, and David's murderers came right back home, across the valley from where we were living. And you could hear the celebratory music that they were playing. And we were trying to console the widow of David, and her 5-year-old son came home from kindergarten, all excited. Mommy, did you hear that the men that killed Daddy came home today? Does that mean that Daddy's coming home too? I'm sorry, I get choked up when I tell this story. Does that mean that Daddy's coming home too? Anyway, I befriended Abu Ismail, and I used to visit him in his home even after I left my job as a replacement for David Rosenfeld. and we became very, very close friends until one day, Abu Ismail, with a tear in his eye, he said, "Bruce, don't visit me anymore at my home. Some of the bad neighbors threatened him and his family for associating with a Jew." Okay, my personal story. I was teaching violin to a family, a young man, in Alon Shvut, which is like a 25-minute drive. And his older brother, Daniel, was an officer in the IDF. And during the first Intifada, the Arab uprising, instead of just bombing a house that they knew that terrorists were in, they tried a very silly operation to not harm any civilians that were in the area by not just bombing the house, which would cause collateral damage and civilian casualties. Daniel Mandel was killed. So the IDF risks their own soldiers' lives in order not to cause civilian Arab casualties. Another Mandel, a Kobe Mandel, was a 13-year-old boy. He and his friend Yossi Ishran missed the bus to school, on purpose or not, I don't know. We can't ask them anymore, because they took a walk into the valley, the nearby valley, maybe a 15, 20-minute walk, and Arabs fell upon them and stoned the two of them to death. These are the kinds of experiences that you won't read about on the internet. And there are good Arabs, as I told you, Abu Ismail and his family. Other Arabs that I was asked by them to do guard duty because it was required after the Intifadas that any Arab worker coming into a Jewish community needs to have an Israeli guard, an armed guard. And so very often I'm called by my Arab friends, "Bruce, I need you to be our guard because we can't earn a living without having a guard." So I'm doing them a favor by being their guard. This is the crazy situation that we live in Israel. Whenever there's some kind of terrorist attack, what happens? There's very often collective punishment. It seems like collective punishment because Arab workers are not allowed into Jewish communities. So the good, hardworking Arab that wouldn't dare harm a Jew is out of work that day, and maybe the next day. So this is the situation. Bethlehem. I live a 5-minute drive from Bethlehem. That's where Tekoa is. Years ago, when we first moved to Tekoa, we drove through Bethlehem to go home because there was no Oslo and there was no area A, B, and C. We can't go into Bethlehem today, even though it's 5 minutes from my home. So we used to drive through Bethlehem, and come Christmas time, we were stopped on the road by an Arab, and my car's filled with my children. No. Oh. It was Santa Claus. And Christian Arab Santa Claus stopped our car and gave treats to our children. That was back when Bethlehem was 80% Christian. Today, it's 80% Muslim. Under the PA, which Bethlehem is now under the PA, thank you, Oslo, the Christians left en masse. Today, the ratio is reversed. It's 20% Christians and 80% Muslim Arabs. Back when, before it became Area A, before Oslo, but during the Intifadot, the uprisings, I was doing guard duty as a reserve soldier in Bethlehem one time. And I drove my car to the parking lot in Nativity Square, and my car is parked down below. I was up on an administrative building. Across the parking lot on the other side is a police station, and off to my right is the Church of the Nativity. All of a sudden, I'm looking down at my car, and flames are coming up from the bottom of my car. And so I get on the walkie-talkie, and I tell my officer, my car is on fire. I'm coming down to move it. And he says, you stay where you are. That's an order. And I'm sitting there watching my car go up in flames once the gas tank caught fire. It went up like, it seemed like a mushroom cloud. Before the fire department came, there were 2 Arab television crews filming it. It was all orchestrated in advance. All orchestrated in advance. And on Jordanian news that night, they showed my car going up in flames. You couldn't make out it was a private vehicle anymore. They said an Israeli army vehicle was set ablaze by, what do they call them? They have a nice name for these terrorists. Okay, in Tekoa, I once recorded a sermon that was broadcast from a mosque across the valley. And what did the sermonizer say, the imam? He said, we are going to overrun Jewish Tekoa. We are going to kill all the men and children and take the women to become the whores of the Muslim heroes. This was a sermon. So part of the problem, and I ask my Arab friends, what is the problem? Because we get along on the one-to-one very nicely. Why the problem? It says our leaders. Not just political leaders, religious leaders. Just like in Christianity and in Judaism, there are different flavors of congregations. Same thing with the Muslims. There's the militant Islam, and there's the Jew-friendly Islam as well. Okay, I have here something I'd like to show you. This is an Arabic flyer. One of the things that I was involved with in Israel was the Islam-Israel Fellowship. And I was appointed director of the Islam-Israel Fellowship. And as such, I petitioned the Muslim Council of Scholars of Italy to come out with this. It's a statement that I had translated from Italian into Arabic so that my neighbors could read it. It says, if you think that you are going to heaven to get your 72 virgins by harming or killing an Israeli, a Jew, or an American, you are mistaken. You're going the other direction. And it gives the Islamic reasoning, the theological reasoning for that. And so I was handing these out locally, and I carried them with me when I traveled. In 2001, I was on a plane from New York to California. And I board the plane, and sitting next to me, I introduce myself to the person sitting next to me, and he's from Saudi Arabia. And so I whoop this out, and I hand this to him, and I say, would you read this over and tell me what you think? And he reads it over very carefully, and he hands it back and says, this is true Islam. This was the day before 9/11 in 2001. And I'm thinking to myself, what if I were on that plane, not that day, but the next day, and I handed it to an Arab from Saudi Arabia, because most of the 9/11 terrorists were from Saudi Arabia. What would he have thought? Allah is speaking to me, all of a sudden I get this? I don't know. Or maybe he would take his knife out and knife me immediately. I don't know, but it's another one of my experiences that you won't read on the internet. Horowitz. I once did guard duty for an Israeli who was supervising a building project. And he was driving home one day. He lived in Bat Ayan, which is, again, not far from where I live, maybe a half hour away. And on his way home, he saw an Arab terrorist knifing a resident of Toccoa at a bus stop. And so he takes out his pistol and he points it at the terrorist, and he shoots, and the gun jams because he put it against the glass of his car. So what does he do? His pistol is worthless. He jumps out of the car, and he confronts the terrorist barehanded, and he gets knifed. He suffered tremendous pains until the terrorist was neutralized and captured. And the terrorist was now suffered some injuries. I went to visit Horowitz, that was the Israeli's name, in the hospital. Across the hall from him was the murderer getting treatment. Israel is maybe a little bit too progressive. Okay, another person that I met, I meet people, I think sometimes it's the finger of God. I met an American in Israel who was vacationing in Israel. He had a heart for Israel. He's not Jewish. And he was a sergeant in the American Army, stationed in the Sinai. His job and his unit's job was to monitor transport across the Sinai to make sure that armaments are not getting into Gaza across the Sinai from Egypt. He was offered another job to be a lifeguard down in Sharm el-Sheikh, in the southern tip of the Sinai, at a swimming pool. And he said, wow, I'll take that. And his whole unit that was supposed to be monitoring military transport across the Sinai was down vacationing in Sharm el-Sheikh. And this was going on for decades. Dr. Uri Milstein, He you will find on the internet. He's an author, and he said that had my book, and here's the Hebrew version of it, had my book gotten to Israel military intelligence, it might have prevented October 7th. Because he believed that what happened on October 6th, 50 years prior, probably happened on October 7th a couple years ago. Let me tell you about one of my Arab friends, or former friends, a lovely Arab, very religious, always tried to interest me in Islam, and I listened politely. You could learn a lot. There's a lot of Arab culture and behavior that is quite beautiful, and I would say highly recommended. We became very close friends, and I was, at the beginning of October 7th, I was sharing videos with him. And in one video, there was a crowd of apparently Gazans watching a young woman being burned to death. And I said, Omar, if this is your Islam, you can take it and shove it, I can't say in church where I told him to shove it. And I expected him to say, Bruce, obviously that's not my Islam. Unfortunately, I never heard that from him. So that's a little bit discouraging, very discouraging. So I think that's basically what I have to share with you, that you won't find on the internet. And I'd like to end with this. You know, we Jews are expecting the Messiah, and we have certain prerequisites for the coming of the Messiah. And the first two are, number one, the ingathering, the return of the children of Israel to their homeland. And we're getting pretty close. There's about as many Jews in Israel as outside of Israel. So we're getting very close. And the second thing is the rebuilding of Solomon's temple. And so another man that I happened to meet, and this also might be what I call God incidental, Dr. Mahdi Abdul Hadi. He was the senior member of the Waqf, which is the Muslim religious council that's in charge of the Temple Mount. And many of the inciting things that lead to eruptions and disruptions come from the Waqf and the Temple Mount. And these riots began already back over 100 years ago. 1920 was the first well-documented one. Another one was 1929, when the Jewish community of Hebron was massacred because the Arabs falsely were saying that the Jews were going to take over the Temple Mount. And it was all false. So this Dr. Mahdi Abdul Hadi, I had a nice conversation with him, and we spoke about that the Waqf can be the instrument to bringing about peace in Israel and the world. All they have to do is to invite the Jews up to the Temple Mount to rebuild the temple. He said, that is a very good idea, but we can't do it because it's impolite. Impolite? Yes, because the chief rabbinate of Israel has a prohibition against Jews ascending the mount. So it would be bad protocol for us to invite the Jews to rebuild the temple until this prohibition were rescinded. So I wrote an article. I'm trying to get the temple rebuilt by alerting the chief rabbinate to allow it to happen. It's ironic that the chief rabbinate might be the stumbling block to rebuilding the temple and bringing the Messiah. That's Herodian. I spoke about that already. Whoops. You know, we Jews read a Torah portion each Shabbat. So I read the Torah portion today, and I'm going to tie this in with the Northwest of America somehow. How can you possibly do that? I think there's something wrong. Okay. The flax and the barley were crushed by the hail because the 10 plagues are outlined in this Torah portion. Since the barley was ripe and the flax had formed stalks. What does that mean? It means that the barley was aviv. In Hebrew, we say aviv. If you ask any Israeli, what does aviv mean? He'll tell you, what, you don't know? Aviv is spring. But no, not in the Bible. In the Bible, in the Torah, aviv is a certain stage of ripeness of the barley grain. That's what aviv is. It means that the barley is roastable. So this is very strange that all of a sudden, in the middle of the narrative of the 10 plagues, we are told that the barley was aviv, and that's the word used, and I don't see why the Hebrew isn't here. But anyway, take my word for it. The barley was aviv, but the wheat was still green. So the barley was destroyed, but the wheat wasn't. So we know that the Hebrew calendar is not necessarily the rabbinic calendar. I was always calling it the Hebrew calendar. But it's actually the rabbinic calendar, and the rabbinic calendar, I'm sorry to say, rabbis, please wake up. The rabbinic calendar is wrong 90% of the time. Why? Because the new moon has drifted since the rabbinic calendar was initiated back in the 4th century, and the aviv barley is not checked. So very often, the barley is not aviv, and you have to add a leap month to the Hebrew calendar. It's involved. But what I'm saying is that I check barley every year to see if the rabbinic calendar is off by a month or if it's on, if it's correct. And there's a lady, Mishaya, who was in Israel and helped me plant barley outside the old city walls of Jerusalem, who refers to herself as a prophetess. And I told her about a message dream that I had. And again, I don't want to go too much over time, so I won't bore you with the details of that dream, but it was definitely a message dream. And the setting was in Tel Aviv. And she said, "Excuse me, why was this setting in Tel Aviv? It's a secular city. Why wasn't the setting of this message dream in Jerusalem or Hebron or Safed? Why was it in Tel Aviv? I said, I have no idea. She said, don't you see? Your job is to tell Aviv. If anybody knows Mishaya, I lost contact with her maybe 10 or 15 years ago. I would love to reconnect with this prophetess. Before Moses spoke before God, saying, even the Israelites have not listened to me, so how will Pharaoh listen to me? For I am a man of blocked lips. I'm not Ben Shapiro. I can't even listen to him speaking as fast as he speaks. I mean, the guy is like supersonic speaker. I'm nothing like that. And I guess Moses wasn't either. So, again, I want to thank Pastor John and Pastor David for the opportunity to, in my feeble way, to share my truths. And like Moses, I hope that my truths can get out there and be heard. Thank you. Thank you all. Shabbat Shalom.
Powerful words, powerful words. See, I told you you'd get to hear some things about what takes place in the land that you probably won't get to on your evening news or any of the other talking heads that you see. Did y'all enjoy that? Come on. Like I was sharing earlier, we've had the privilege of having a relationship with Bruce. Jamie Louie. Jamie was not able to, he was out of state today, but it's interesting to see the connections over the course of the years, and I really appreciate him talking about the finger of God. We've sat down kneecap to kneecap for the last week, and we were talking about incidences in our lives when you can say, there's no way that man could orchestrate these things. It has to be the finger of God taking and moving people and putting their lives together. And I believe that Jamie Louie is a connector, and there's no doubt in my mind that Bruce is as well. He connects people and he puts them together. And in doing that, once more, I want to remind you that we don't believe it's a coincidence or an accident that he's here. So you pay attention. Those of you that have listened online, if you, we can get a recording of this. It'll be up shortly. And that way you'll be able to hear some of the things again and revisit some of the things he shared. And by all means, get his book. Is it on Amazon?
I'm not here.
Your book? Where can they order your book?
Oh, on Amazon.
Okay, yeah. All right. What I'd like to do now is give you an opportunity to give. I want to ask the folks to come up. We want to be a blessing to Bruce. He didn't ask us to do this, but we still want to be a blessing to him. So if I could get the girls to come, well, the girl to come. Come on, Miss Jean. Oh, there's Beck. Come on, Beck. Come on, Miss Jean.
Ready to give? You put your hands together. Thank you. Give, and it will come back to you. Come on and give, and it will come back to you. Give, and it will come back to you. Good measures, press down, shake it together, and run it over. Give, and it will come back to you. Come on and give, and it will come back to you. Give, and it will come back to you. Good measures, press down, shake it together, and run it over. Give, and it will come back to you. Come on and give, and it will come back to you. Give, and it will come back to you. Good measures, press down, shake it together, and run it over.
All righty. Thank you so much. We appreciate those of you online. If you'd like to donate, just let Brittany know, and she'll take care of that. And once again, we're just so grateful that you were here to tune in with us. I believe that today was a divine appointment. And actually, Bruce and I have been talking about collaborating on a book together, maybe taking some of the mutual finger of God incidences and putting them together. It's amazing when you go back and see how He's able to orchestrate your life and bring yourself, your circle of influence to where it's affecting other people's lives. And so I'm just grateful for that. Amen? Amen. By the way, you can see that there's a number of our congregation that's not here today. My own personal family, I just thank you for your prayers, your petitions that went up on behalf of our daughter and our son-in-law, and we'll just share that privately with the rest of you. And of course, Shepherd John and his bride had some things that they had to take care of today as well. But we all understand Jeremiah 29:11, my favorite verse. This is Abba speaking in the first person. I have plans for you, plans for good and not for evil, to bring you to an expected destination. So we know that whatever's been going on is to get you to the place that He needs you to be, to have your attention. Amen? Amen. Thank you so much. Don't forget your weekly assignment, to love one another as you have been loved by Him. All right? Shabbat Shalom.